way, right here.
Welcome to Smart Planet TV. I'm Beth Smart. Today we're in Big Pine Key, home of the key deer, the tiniest subspecies of North American white-tailed deer found only here in the Florida Keys. Once on the brink of extinction, these charming little deer have made an inspiring comeback. But a few years ago, one fawn's world was turned upside down when a fast-moving fire tore through her habitat. Firefighter Jen Shockley tells the tale.
So I was here with my partner, maintaining the line, making sure fire didn't jump onto the house. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw something running from across this field, and that's when I noticed it was a little fawn. So we were staged right here, and the fawn started running. I dropped my line, screamed to my partner. I said, I'm going in. He didn't really know what was happening at the time because I just took off running. And I sprinted after the fawn, and I followed him through here. And the flames, as you can see, were at least 4 feet high, going up into the pines and all the other vegetation here. I ran through.
But hang on just a second. Jen sure is showing such incredible courage, and I truly hope she finds that frightened little fawn. Now, before we discover what happens next, let's learn more about key deer from our expert, Christy Killam, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
The key deer are amazingly adaptable. They live throughout a variety of different habitats. They live in these pine rockland habitats. They live in hardwood hammock habitats. They browse for food along the mangrove edges and shorelines, so they're out on beaches areas and beach berm areas. They're good swimmers. We actually have a bunch that live on islands that are that you literally have to swim to. And they also feel quite comfortable living nearby people too. There's always the threat of being hit by an automobile, so we ask that people drive the speed limit and drive deer-fensively, we call it around here, and just keep an eye, especially during fawn season, because the little guys will run around and not really be paying attention to roadways.
As close as this deer is to me is exactly the reason that they come into harm's way by the hand of man. This deer should typically be scared of human beings or coming up to people or approaching people. But unfortunately, they're being fed out of the goodness of people's hearts and also for other reasons so they can see a deer up close. The animals are not necessarily getting the nutrition they need. So that makes them not scared of people, and sometimes they do step in front of cars.
So we always tell people, we want you to come, we want you to appreciate these incredible endangered species, but know that they're out there in the woods and they know how to feed themselves.
That's really important information to be aware of, and I'm thankful to Christy for sharing her knowledge with us. But like me, I'm sure you are all anxious to hear more about the little fawn that ran into the forest. So let's get back to Jen and see what happens next.
So he started running full speed right to the head of the fire where we were fighting back about 4 to 5 foot flames, and he darted into the fire, and I screamed to my partner. I said, I'm going in. I dropped my line. My partner followed behind me, and I jumped into the fire and followed the deer into the woods, and I started looking for him, and I saw him darting. He looked so scared. He was trembling, his big, huge eyes. And as I came up on him, I reached down, and he just laid down calmly, almost like he knew that I was there to snatch him up out of the woods. And I grabbed him, I tucked him under my arm, I covered his face. He didn't struggle to get away. It was almost like he was relieved. He just tucked right into my little nook there, covered him up, and I just started running out of the fire and ran out and then went to the tanker where I put him inside the cab of the tanker so he could relax and acclimate to what was going on. And I had to immediately respond back to the fire line because we were actively fighting fire at that point.
What a terrifying ordeal for this frightened and helpless little deer. Thank goodness Jen spotted him when she did. I can only hope he's going to pull through. But before we uncover how his story ends, let's take a closer look at wildfires and the powerful impact they have on key deer and other wildlife. Melanie Benton explains.
In this environment right here, what you have is basically also an environment that's ripe for disease and malnourished plants, I guess it would be. You know, plants thrive on oxygen and sunlight, and whenever you have an area that's completely covered like this, not a lot of oxygen gets in, not a lot of sunlight gets in. So you basically don't have as good of a plant base for animals to eat and live in and bed down in. The thing is that even though wildfires are bad, they also produce some really great environment and habitat for animals. Once it's gone through, once it's been put out, the regrowth that you get is amazing. You think of eating an older vegetable as opposed to a tender new shoot. That's the sort of thing that you're looking at for animals. They have a new food base. They have a stronger, more healthier food base. They have areas that are just more comfortable to live in. I mean, and so keeping these areas open also limits disease, the amount of ticks, the amount of parasites, that sort of thing, that can grow in an overgrown, stuffy environment.
Within a day or two of the fire, feeding on some of there'll be little saps and things like that in the pine trees and other plants that they'll feed on. So we're actually really encouraged about the future for this area, not only for the key deer, but for the there's a whole lot of endangered plants and animals that we rely on the pine rockland habitat.
Tell me a little bit more about the history of the key deer. I know something changed in the 1950s.
Well, in the 1950s, that was when the establishment of the National Key Deer Refuge took place, 1957. And their numbers at that point had dropped as low as estimates are 25 to 50 key deer due to overhunting. And so once the refuge was established, their population continued to increase and is what it is today.
It's incredible to see the key deer making a comeback. The current population is estimated to be just under 1,000. And although wildfires can play a vital role in renewing their habitat, one question remains: what became of our little fawn? Let's turn to Jen for the rest of the story.
After I returned back to the cab of the tanker, he was lethargic. He was responsive and conscious, but he was laying down. His heart was beating very rapidly. You could tell he was scared. He was still shaking. And at that point, I opened up a bottle of fresh water, put a little bit of water in my hand and took it to his mouth, and he was able to drink a little bit of water. And then we administered oxygen through a mask. That way we could try to combat some of the smoke inhalation. He, at that point, became more alert, and after we administered water and oxygen, he was up on his feet and he was very curious, looking out the window and, you know, kind of wondering, where am I, what's happening? And it was definitely a full turnaround, because when I first put him in the tanker, I was worried for his well-being, just the way he was acting. He definitely seemed like he might have been going downhill, but he responded well to the treatment. And after the incident was controlled in our area and our unit was released, the fawn was passed over to Fish and Wildlife, and then Fish and Wildlife released the fawn into the area in which it was rescued from.
For this little fawn, the story has a happy ending, all because one brave firefighter was there when it mattered most. But keeping the key deer safe takes all of us working together. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again on the next episode of Smart Planet TV as we continue exploring the wonders and challenges of our natural world.